Oh, you know what? I don't have anything to say. I mean, you know who he is. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Steve Olsson. Right?
That's it. You did great. That was awesome.
Steve Olsson, right?
Okay. All right. Well, it's amazing to be back here, I have to say. Many of you know me as the Mezcal guy. That's what I talk about quite often, and it is near and dear to my heart and my passion. Some of you know me as that bar guy from Beverage Alcohol Resource. I don't know if you realize this, but we have more graduates from bar from the country of Greece than any other country in the world except Mexico and the United States, believe it or not. Number 3. And I don't even know for sure about Mexico. They go back and forth every year because we have so many. But I don't think most of you probably know about my history working in Greece. And I just want to make sure you understand that I've worked here for 20 years in the wine trade, right? I mean, this is like a second home to me. Of course, I love the food and I love the wine. Who couldn't? You'd have to in our business. But for me, it's more about the place. And it's about the people. And I love coming here. And over the time that I worked in the wine trade, I kept finding all these amazing little spirits with my friends, Teddy. And as a matter of fact, Teddy and I always wanted to make a gin, and we always wanted to do Cipro. And as a matter of fact, a few years ago, some of you might remember that I stood on this very stage and chastised you Greek bartenders for not supporting your own indigenous spirit. And apparently that must have done something out in the business because it seems to have taken off. Walking through that agave area out there, I have to remember being right here on this stage with Tom Estes, Julio Bermejo, Guillermo Saza, and me talking agave spirits at a time when it was just really emerging here. I don't know if you realize also that Greece is the number 4 export market for mezcal, which is really, really cool for me, and gave me another excuse to come back here a lot. But it was actually a few years ago. I was going to say after COVID, but you can't really say that, right? It was when we were just starting to reopen stuff and come back out. And I remember Athens bar shows going back and forth. Can we pull it off? Should we do it? Is it right? Is it politically correct? And finally, Babas and his team just said, we're doing it. That's it. We're doing it. And I came here and I stood on this stage, and I can tell you right now, I don't think I've ever had a more emotional moment on stage in my entire life. Now granted, I was teaching about sustainability in mezcal, so it was very emotional anyway. But to be surrounded by you here in Athens, the first time I'd been on stage in almost 2 years because of COVID. And at that time, we didn't know if we were ever going to get to see each other again, and here we were. And before you know it, we were all breaking all the rules and hugging and doing all that stuff you're not supposed to. And what do you know? We all made it through. But I will say this. You heard it here. I speak at a lot of these events, but there is no question in my mind that Athens Bar Show is my favorite cocktail week of the year. And I just want to give a shout out to Babas and his team right now. Give it up for them for doing the job they do. All these guys back there. It's mind-blowing. It just blows my mind what we've been able to do. So, and what they've been able to do to elevate our craft. They continue to push the envelope, which is really cool. So, here's the deal. I'm going to set the premise right now, all right? I am not here to prove anything. This is not up for debate. I have been given 45 minutes, which is now about 35 minutes, to present a very unique way of thinking about a very special category. And that, of course, would be gin. Just think this way. In the beginning, all spirits were basically flavored spirits. Why did we do that? Well, it was bad spirit. Or we were trying to preserve botanicals. Or we were trying to have foodstuffs and spices and herbs to be able to use later. Or, let's not forget about medicine. Medicine was always the excuse, right, that we used to drink. So, in the 13th century, we had juniper spirits that were tonics for health. By the 16th century, there are dozens of documents that talk about juniper aquavitae, and what are they for? Medicine. It's always for medicine, and whether it's your kidney ailments or colic or menstrual cramps, juniper apparently is the cure-all for everything, or at least that was our excuse to drinking it. So, I don't have time, unfortunately, to give you my whole history of the evolution of gin as much as I would love to. And if you want that, you're going to have to come to Bar 5, or or you're going to have to read David Wonderton's Oxford Companion to Spirits, or you're going to have to read Dave Broome's brilliant book on gin, all of which you should probably read and do anyway. But I'm going to skip forward. I'm going to give you my revisionist history version. And I just want you to remember, in the beginning, local spirit, local flavors, local botanicals, as we call them. Can we just go there? All right. So then why is Holland the birthplace of gin? Why is the UK shortly after the place where it explodes? It all comes down to Holland as the center for distillation for the globe, and then both places as the center for the spice trade. Spices in those days were even more rare than now. They traded like gold. And this opened the door to all the exotic botanicals that today we consider commonplace. But in those days, angelica and orris root and cardamom and coriander, those were rare and special and came from faraway places. And when you put them in a spirit, it made it more valuable. It made it more special. It made it more coveted, maybe more medicinal. Maybe it gave you an excuse. But the bottom line is, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, London, this opens the door. East India trade, okay, can we go there? So, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you all the amazing stories and the exciting history. I don't have time to tell you about the 400 distilleries in Rotterdam at that time. I don't even have time to tell you why Dutch courage became the word that we use to describe gin. It's one of the greatest stories on the planet. I don't have time to tell you about William of Orange's crazy laws governing brandy that made gin explode in England. Did you know that in the 1730s, England's death rate was higher than its birth rate, and 1 in 4 homes were supposedly distilling, and they had all this legislation they came out with to shut that shit down? This was terrible. David Wondrich at one point compared London in the 1700s to the New York City crack epidemic of the 1980s. Seriously, it was that bad. And everything began to change, and they made new laws, so you couldn't do that, and pretty soon we have distilleries. I don't have time to talk about this, though, nor can I talk about the punch houses, or the drink bars, or all the sporting life, how it changed gin and made it into an officer's drink while rum became the sailor's drink. Imagine that. I can't tell you why it was called both Mother's Milk and Mother's Ruin, even though they were. Speaking of Mother's Ruin, just look at this. This is a Hogarth from that period of time. Do you see what's going on? This is Gin Lane, okay? They're eating the frickin' baby. The dog is chewing on her feet. You know, they're all drunk. They're all plastered. They're all horrible human beings. So this is where it was. Now, I don't have time either to tell you how important continuous distillation was to the evolution of London dry gin, or the fact that it didn't even appear as a category to the 1880s. That would seem to matter to us. I don't have time to talk about the popularity, the notoriety of gin in all of those classic American cocktails, whether they be flips or fixes or fizzes or, of course, the martini, let's not forget that. And I definitely don't have time to talk about London dry being bathtub gin, because that's what happened. It was bathtub gin in Prohibition in the United States that blew that category up. Now, here's what's really important to understand, though, is after Prohibition, London dry gin is the only gin we have. All the others are gone. We don't have Old Tom. We don't have Dutch gin. We don't have Plymouth. We just have London dry. So virtually every recipe that you know was adapted to London dry, which is dry, unsweetened gin. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I would just tell you right now, if you're going to use any of the gins I'm going to show you today, or any other gins in a cocktail that's a classic recipe, the first thing you have to do is look at the recipe that you're researching. When did it come from? Was it Old Tom? Was it London gin? Was it Holland's gin? This is going to completely change how much sweetness and how much fruit and so forth are in the recipe, and you need to be aware of that. Unfortunately, I don't have time to talk about the era of the fear of flavor. Yeah, this is the time when vodka takes over. Slick marketing in the 1950s, Smirnoff takes it off. Vodka becomes the rage. Gin basically disappears and becomes unimportant. It took us like 50 years to bring this shit back. Now, for me, coming up, we have like 4 gins to work with. Seriously. In our bars, we had 4, and they were all London dries, except once in a while we saw Plymouth. Sometimes we'd see Old Raj when that finally made a comeback, but other than that, it was basically 3 or 4 London dry gins. Really, seriously. Do you know how many there are today? 4,000. 4,000 gin brands in the world today from basically 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And what happened basically is in 2000, Tanqueray 10 came out and changed the world, right? right behind it, like 2-3 months later, they were planning it apparently at the same time, Hendrix comes out. And you have these two gins that just say, yeah, whatever gin was, we're going to take it over here and do something different. Both with London Dry as their role model, but both taking it to a new place. And I mean, we thought our world had changed forever. We were so freaking excited. We couldn't even believe it. Oh, gin is finally going to explode. Everyone's going to start drinking gin. It didn't happen. By 2005, we had exactly 12 brands. It was really cool. But then it started to happen. And you know why it happened? Because of you, bartenders. Bartenders started getting people to understand that gin was in all those classic recipes, and we were going to make it with gin whether you liked it or not. By the way, did everyone get a cocktail on their way in? I'll talk about that in a minute. Did everyone get it? All right, good. And you all should be getting your first gin now, because I'm going to start a tasting. I'm only doing 4 today. I could do 40. I could do 100, but we're going to do 4 because they only gave me 40 minutes, and I want to give them all their due. So, here's the deal. When this thing exploded, like just about anything, think about the cocktail business for those of you who were around back in the 90s, right? Everything kind of blew up. And basically what happened is every brewer that had a still decided it was his God-given right to make gin. And all these people who had never made gin before started making gin because they thought it was easy. But any distiller will tell you it's the hardest spirit in the world to make. And people were basically taking all these botanicals and throwing shit at the wall. And unfortunately, most of it didn't stick, okay? So what we had were some really bad gins. But what's happened lately is a complete turnaround, and that is why we're talking today. So I want you to think global for the category, and then I want you to think local for the ingredients. And I'm going to read something to you. This is my premise. This is what I'm going to show you today in these gins. Well, you can decide, but it's not up for argument. I just want to present something. That a certain group of like-minded yet completely diverse individuals have created local gins using local botanicals, and by doing so have created gins that speak of place. They are emblematic of that place and the people that craft the liquids, and therefore, because these gins are local and taste of place, they truly represent terroir. And that's where we're going to begin. So what I've done is I've hand-selected a few of my favorites. I have many more. We can talk about them if we have time a little bit later on. Every one of these represents this idea of terroir in this way. First of all, they are all small. They are all handcrafted. They are all made by hand in small distilleries, in small stills, at very, very small production levels. They are all independent, okay? They are all using local botanicals, and every one of them practices levels of sustainability that I don't even have time to talk about today, but I will allude to, and they all do good in their community. Now, understand something. The EU, in its infinite wisdom, created these DOs not long ago, and we needed them, but they kind of screwed it up, and I don't think they meant to. I don't think it was their intention. But now, you can make London Dry Gin anywhere you want as long as you follow the rules. Now, that doesn't make sense, does it? That's not really a DO, is it? How can it be a DO if it's just the process and not the place? So it kind of messed things up for us, but at the same time, I'm going to use that to talk about the difference and how important the botanicals are, all right? I am going to start with this one, J. Rieger & Company. That's the one you should have right there. And by the way, the other 3, are all available in Greece. This one is not. And I'm going to talk about a few others that are not available in Greece, because I know you guys will go out and pound on the doors until you get those beautiful gins brought in here. So, J. Rieger is, it's my way of starting this by saying, yes, but. So I have all these gins that show you local botanicals, but I wanted to show you something that is quite confusing. Everybody knows Tom Neville, right? Master distiller of Terroir for 40 years. Tom and I worked together on Terroir 10. Tom and I have been best buds for years. Tom, I brought in to help create J. Rieger. And we had an idea. Nobody in the United States, everybody, you want to know where most of those gins were that I was talking about throwing shit at the wall? They were from the United States, and most of them were sucked. There were just a handful of people doing really, really serious stuff. All of them thought they were doing serious stuff. Don't underestimate the potential. And there are some great gins made in the U.S. However, London Dry Gin, that's a special thing. And it's really, really hard to do. And it was my belief having worked in gin for so many years, that if we had the same botanicals they had in London, we could make London dry gin just like they do in London, because the place doesn't matter anymore. It's all about the process, but the key is, it's really about the botanicals. So we brought Tom in. Tom crafted it. There he is, master gin distiller. This is defining London dry gin, but I already have enough for you, and you all know this anyway. So Rieger's Midwestern Dry Gin is Kansas City, Missouri's ode to London dry gin, and I ask you to smell it, and I ask you to taste it, and no, it's not Tanqueray. Tom intentionally set out to do something different than Tanqueray, but that is London dry gin, and in a blind tasting, and I can prove this with any one of you, I'll put it in a blind tasting, you will all say, oh, London dry gin, because it is, it's London dry gin. And the point is this: with the correct botanicals, you can do it, but you also have to have the technique and the machine. That is the still that Tom designed. Imagine after 40 years in Diageo, he was still using those stills, and we thought, well, Tom, you're like the genius of distillation of gin. If you could design a still to make the best gin in the world, what would it look like? That's it. He drew it on the back of a cocktail napkin, and we had it built for him. So what are you going to do? And then I just wanted to show you some of the other stills that are being used for gin, some of which Tom worked on. There are lots of different ways we can get the botanicals. And we're not going to get into that so much, but it is important with every one of the gins that you're about to taste. And then we get to this one, you go, whoa, 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 hang on a second. Those look like cognac stills to me, and that's because they are. So now we're going to go into this concept of place. So I would assume everybody knows Citadel by now. If you don't, you should. Citadel actually, we always give Tanqueray 10 and Hendricks credit for changing the world, and they did. But Citadel was actually first. They started a few years before the other guys. They just kept it local was the thing. While the great distiller Alexander Gabriel, who most of you know from Maison Ferrand, decided how he wanted to do it and how he wanted to make it local. But now, completely sustainable. They planted their own juniper trees. They planted their own lemon trees. It's really quite remarkable. This is what it looks like. So everybody should have that. And they're bringing a third now already? These guys are good, aren't they? Do you have 3? 2? 3? Unbelievable. Oh, let me go back. I'm sorry. 19 different botanicals in this one. Okay, very important. The question always becomes, do you really need 19 botanicals? And I would say the proof is in the gin. Taste it. I mean, far be it from me to tell Alexander Gabriel what he should be doing in his gin. I think it's pretty damn good gin, and I show it in almost every seminar I've ever done. He also patented, it's the only patented type of botanical infusion in the world, which, that's typical Alexander too, to be on the cutting edge and then do something that nobody else has ever done before. And then the sustainability, I mentioned it earlier, but again, these guys are fully tuned into this, which is really, really cool. Do you like? Are we good so far? So do you see the difference already? They're all kind of based on London Dry, because that's the benchmark. And yet all of them deviate in a different way and start to bring in the local botanicals. Now, if I put that in a blind tasting, there's not one of you that would say it was London Dry gin, because there's too much other stuff going on. Maybe it's a London Dry with a lot of botanicals. Maybe, yeah. So you begin to see, and I'm warming you up for it, okay? We're going to get a little bit more extreme as we go, because I like to and I can. So there. As a matter of fact, on that note, you all got a cocktail, right? You all have gin number 3 in front of you already. Boy, we are moving fast, aren't we? I'm going to take a quick segue here. It just so happens that a very close friend of mine, who is also a bar grad, who made you that beautiful cocktail, which is actually, well, I'll let him tell you about it. You can tell him. As I mentioned, Teddy and I had wanted to make a Greek gin for years, but this is the guy who actually said, no, I'm going to do this. We're going to make this happen. And with Adriano, who's here also, created straight up gin. You're going to taste that next. And since we're in Greece, and since he's here, I want Johnny to come up and tell you about his gin himself instead of me doing it, but also tell him about that little drink that you made. Johnny, come on. I just needed a break.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, everybody. So, Steve, thank you so much for having me on stage with you. It's an honor because really, this question is, about showcasing terroir and gin. That was the question that really inspired us to create Stray Dog. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm from, this accent isn't a Greek accent, as you can tell. I am from the United States, from New York, Greek American, working in the Greek restaurant world, and showcasing Greek food and Greek wine was always something that was very passionate in mine. And the idea of being able to showcase the flavors of Greece was something that I was inspired actually on a trip to Greece with Ted. We were in a winery and drinking tsipuro, and around us were all these wild botanicals, these wild herbs. I put it in my glass, and about an hour or two later, after it infused, I realized that there wasn't gin being made in Greece, yet we have a tremendous history and culture of distilling. We have the most amazing raw materials and beautiful botanicals surrounding us. We have history of making products like tipuro, ouzo, which ouzo and gin are basically first cousins. So why isn't anyone doing this? So that's what really inspired us. So I'll talk a little bit about the process, the botanicals we use. And the cocktail. So in the theme of showcasing terroir, so we have Stray Dog gin, which is distilled with wild forage botanicals from Greece, like sage, rosemary, bay leaf, cardamom, masticha, orange and lemon peel. And we're using a honey syrup that's made with local wildflower honey as well, and also lemon juice from Greece. So everything in your cocktail is locally sourced. So that's something that we're really happy to be showcasing in our drink for you all. It's just a classic bee's knees. We garnish it with a sage leaf to bring out a lot of those savory botanicals that are in our gin. So here we have the Lutra Pozar. This is the water that we use to make gin. You know, gin is over 50% water, so water is an important ingredient. All of our water comes from a natural spring that adds body, that adds texture to the gin, that makes it smooth, helps showcase a lot of the other botanicals that are in there, but really kind of brings together the idea of terroir, going local, using local ingredients, and water is a part of that as well. So all of our botanicals, let's go through them one by one. In addition to juniper, our juniper comes from the mountains of northern Greece as well as the Balkans. We use wild sage, foskomilo, bay leaf, daphne. We also use rosemary and fennel seed, cardamom, orange and lemon peel to give it that brightness and that lightness to it. And then masticha. Masticha is such an important ingredient for Greek gastronomy, Greek distillation. We had to put masticha in our gin, but we use it delicately. You should be able to sense the aromas and the flavor. It also adds texture to the gin, but without being overpowering. Then of course, coriander, kind of to brighten it out. It's a classic botanical to kind of give it depth and texture. So the final product was something that we thought was so classically Greek, something that showcases the flavors of our country here, gives you this savory element, yet bright, perfect for different cocktails. Here's our pictures of some of our botanicals we use from the distillery. So here is our
I
stills.
just put that picture in there so you can see how small the production is.
Exactly, it's a small production.
Big production. Little collection.
So here's our stills we use. So basically, again, we talk about terroir. These are repurposed ouzo stills that we now use to make our gin. Small batch of only a few hundred liters, copper pot stills. We macerate the juniper directly in the distillate for about a day or two, and then all the other botanicals are in a basket right there. These are pretty savory, hearty herbs, so a little goes a long way. So we need to use the basket so that only the vapors pass through these botanicals, so you're getting a light infusion. Yet at the same time, they're pretty well pronounced inside your glass. It's our distillery, that's it.
It's huge.
Yeah, so why do we call it Stray Dog? Well, Stray Dog is named we call it Stray Dog for a few reasons. One, because of the wild botanicals that we use that embody the flavor of Greece. We thought Stray Dog was a perfect correlation to represent that wild side of gin that we're trying to capture. At the same time, we do work with animal shelters, both in Greece and abroad. Right outside of Athens is a shelter called Save a Greek Stray. You can visit their website, saveagreekstray.gr. And from every case we sell, we donate to them. They are a great organization. They help not just dogs, but also cats, farm animals that were displaced in the wildfires this summer and last summer. They do adoption drives, education, veterinary care. They do a lot of great work to make sure there's less stray animals on the streets. And hope you all enjoyed. And I'll be here. We have a table in the Greek Spirits Pavilion. Adriana, what's the booth number?
On the left.
Okay. Well, I'll find the number.
She's at the stand.
She's running the stand now. But it's in the Greek Spirits Pavilion behind Schweppes and the Coca-Cola area. So if you'd like to visit us there and try it again, and a cocktail or another cocktail besides what you had, I'll be there.
Johnny Labanos, give it up.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, no discussion of terroir and gin would be complete without at least visiting Japan. For those of you, has everybody tried a Japanese gin by now? I mean, it's insane what they're doing over there. First of all, as a category, and I hate to, I hate to generalize, but mostly they are very elegant, they are very, very refined, they are impeccably distilled, and that follows Japanese culture and Japanese distillation in general. What I find to be amazing is most of them have been heavily impacted by influences from the United Kingdom, and yet then they incorporate their own ingredients. So they keep that kind of London Dry profile, but then flavor it with all kinds of really cool Japanese ingredients, and they're not afraid. They mess around with fruit, they use teas, they use a lot of different things. This is one that I'm just kind of fanatic about. It's called 135 Degree East, and it comes from a region called Hyogo. And the reason that I decided to put this one out, besides the fact it's really small and hardly anyone knows about it, is that it's so different than all the others. Not just the Japanese, it's different than all gins. They've been actually distilling that for over 100 years because of shoshi, or soju, right? And they make, it's a sake brewery, is what it is. But the master distiller has incorporated like 5 different Japanese ingredients, 3 different traditional ingredients. They do vacuum distillation, which is an incredible concept, which is usually used in perfume. We rarely see that in spirits. These are the botanicals, so I don't have to run through them with you. So I can talk about really cool stuff. What they do after distillation is they add a little bit of ginjo sake, which just a touch. It's called their secret ingredient, but I don't know about secret ingredient because I just told you about it, so there. But it really changes the gin, and it gives it a little bit more, it's very soft. So part of the dilution, in other words, uses sake instead of water. It's really cool, and of course all local water. But do you have it? You have it. Everyone trying it? What do you think? I mean, it's just completely different than our world of gin, as are most of the Japanese gins. But I could name a dozen of them that I think are really good, which I think is really fun. There are so many great gins, and now they come from basically everywhere. I mean, I talked about the U.S., we've shown Europe, but really all over Europe, whether it's, the U.K., oh, now it's coming, or just to the rest of you, okay. I mean, the UK and Holland will always be kind of the epicenter of this distillation and botanical thing. But of course, Germany, Spain is on fire all throughout the Mediterranean basin, really with Italy and Greece. Ireland and Scotland both. I mean, again, great distillation areas that have found a way to incorporate their local botanicals and turn their category into something magical. Japan sets the tone, but quite frankly, there are some really great gins happening all around Asia, which I think is really, really cool. If you haven't tasted the gins of New Zealand, they're on fire. There's a bunch of them. Australia has a bunch. I mean, it's really amazing what's happening out there. And while 5 years ago I would have stood up on this stage, I wouldn't have done the seminar because I would have had to tell you how much crap is still out there. These days, that's not allowed to float anymore. And what's happening is the level, the bar is being raised. And we're getting gins like this that are masterfully distilled, that are made by hand, where the botanicals just sing. And they're local, and they speak a place, which I think is really, really cool. So, and this is where it is in Japan, and there's the meticulous distillation, the whole process, which if you've ever spent any time in Japan, you know that is cultural. I'm going to do one more shout out to one more place. Unfortunately, I could not pour gins from this place here because they're not available in Greece yet. So I'm hoping maybe you guys will help me deal with this. But there's this magical continent just below you here called Africa. And in Africa, most people don't realize that there is a very, very old tradition of gin. They've been making gin there forever, and they drink a lot of gin. But recently, a couple of distilleries have just set the industry on their ear. I mean, they have taken some of these really local indigenous ingredients and turned it into world-class gin, which is really quite remarkable. And I'm going to mention two of them that I think are really special. In Baroche, the indomitable Lorna Scott, an amazing human being, she has actually worked with the Finbos of the biome from the Western Cape and uses only Finbos as her botanicals. It's all based on London Dry Gin and made that style, but then she makes another one that just goes off the deep end, and it's amber, so you think it's oak age? No, it's from the botanicals themselves. So, I mean, check it out. Wild garlic, bouchou, tortoise bush, because turtles eat it, seriously, sour fig, and honeybush. All right? And then there's another one called Bayab, which you should definitely be aware of, Demola Tamayan. This uses botanicals from all over Africa, but it particularly features the Ghanaian fruit of the baobab tree, which is considered a superfood. It's really quite remarkable. But, I mean, most of you have heard of marula because it's used in that liqueur that's relatively popular. African rose, palm sap as a distillate, which goes back, centuries to the very beginning of distillation. Palm sap was used as the base for many of the early distillates. So it's really, really cool what they're doing. And again, in keeping with everything else we're doing, completely sustainable, environmentally responsible. And if you want to learn more about the African things, I suggest you all come to a Jabu festival with me in March. And you can come and taste the African gins, because I will do this seminar there, and I will have the African gins up here with them, so you can see what it's about, because it's really, really cool. And maybe next year, we'll have some African gin in Greece, because you guys will make it happen, because that's what you do. All right. So I am right on time. I'm so happy about this, and maybe we'll even stick around and chat a little bit. But I want to just close out with something here. First of all, with Africa, let me just say this. It's like Japan. It's using local botanicals and taking them to an entirely different level. Like Japan, they are embracing or celebrating the mastery of the art of distillation, which I think is really cool and not expected. In Japan, we've come to expect it. In Africa, we didn't, and it's blowing my mind, and a lot of other people's too. But like only the continent of Africa can do, they are making these amazing gins that truly represent place. Very much like the Stray Dog, where it just speaks of Greece. That, when you taste that, I mean, it's not like drinking Mastika. It's not supposed to be, but you know it's in there, don't you? And when you put that in a cocktail, it's really, really cool. So, right. Look, guys, there's no right or wrong to this. What I would say is that I will never tell you what to drink. I never have, I never will. We don't do it in the school. I don't ever stand up here and say, you should do this. What I try to do is share. I try to share information. I try to empower you with information. And what I would say to you is, just try them. And see if maybe there's a place on your back bar to do something different. Now, on that note, I started teaching gin 30 years ago. True story. I'm that old. I traveled all around the United States and then traveled all over Europe, and we did gin tasting seminars. I actually taught consumers. You remember? I actually taught, she's not that old, actually. No, you couldn't be old enough to remember, but you read about them, yes. That's how we met. I actually was doing seminars where we taught consumers how to blind taste room temperature gin the way we do it. Seriously. And in that same seminar, taught those same consumers how to make classic cocktails in their home using proper ingredients, fresh juices, real tools. This is 1995, people. So I've been talking about gin for a long time, and I've been involved in a lot of gin projects. And I would just say that, again, I will never tell you what to drink, but I think that the world is changing, and I think it's really, really exciting. Now, remember, back in those days, all we had was London Dry, but what you have is totally different. And you have to look at those old recipes. Is it Old Tom? Is it Plymouth? Is it Hollands? Or maybe it was London Dry, but highly unlikely unless it's been rewritten post-Prohibition. But don't think for a second they were using anything like this, because this stuff didn't exist. This is a new thing. Now here's the deal when it comes to cocktails. You guys are all good at this, but don't go out there and grab one of these gins and just assume you're going to make a martini with it, or you're going to make a Negroni with it, or anything else that you want to make. What I would say to you is, they're amazing, and they're fun. Adjust the recipe accordingly. Use them in the classic cocktails, but then play with the recipe. You've got to take that into consideration. Because if you're out there, this is where the problem came in when we first started having all the new gins. Bartenders are taking these exotic gins and throwing them into old classic cocktails, and they sucked. It's like, well, no one will ever drink that gin again because you just screwed it up. Instead, just tweak that recipe or create one for that gin. That's how you do it. I mean, in my opinion. And then, if you do that, you can bring out in the cocktail what this is supposed to be. You bring depth, you bring texture, you bring complexity, but most importantly, perhaps, the intrinsic quality of the spirit shines through the mix, and we get to celebrate the distiller's art. And gin, perhaps more than any other distillation, is a celebration of this art form of distillation, because every distiller will tell you it's the hardest to make, and they'll also tell you less is more. And it took us about 50 years to figure that out. So, terroir. Let's go back to where I started. I think it all depends on how you define it, right? So for me, a product of place, yeah, local flavors, locally sourced, hand of the maker. Yes? Could we say terroir? It's not necessary for you to agree or not agree. Just think about it differently, is what I ask. Because there's a whole new world opening up. And no matter how we define it, these spirits are representing place, which I think is very, very, very important. And then my question is, do they deserve a place on your back bar? That's what you have to start thinking about. So, I'm going to close, and to do so, I want to see how loud you guys can get. This is going to be for those people in the back, and for every single person on Babas's team that runs the Athens Bar Show, because as I started, standing on this stage is very emotional to me because of all the experiences I've had up here, and being here with all of you right now, that's because of that team. So let's give it up for them. Come on. There you go. Okay. That was good. Thank you. That was awesome. So you appreciate it as much as I do. That's all. All right, my final thank you is to everybody in this room for what you do every single day. For caring, for sharing, for mentoring. Our business is completely different than any other business. Every one of you is involved in building community and creating family. And that, to me, is the most important thing that we do. It is the most important thing that happens right here. And we get to come into rooms and be geeks, but what we really do is we're sharing. And we're trying to help others find what we found and take it to the next level, which to me is the most important thing. What we do is, in our business, is we welcome everyone that cares with open arms. We make a place for them. We make a safe place for them. We have a community, and we work together. And to me, that is huge. We are one big family. And maybe most importantly, because that's important, but what we really do is we make our guests happy. It is the coolest thing on the planet to live your life making other people happy. And for doing that, you deserve a huge thank you and a round of applause for yourselves. Thank you very much, everybody. I used every minute.
It's a cut.